Meanwhile, tough questions for Attorney General Pam Bondi from the House Judiciary Committee. She is facing harsh criticism for her department's handling of the Epstein files. Now, this comes after some personal information of Epstein's victims was not redacted in the released files. In Bondi's opening statement to the House Judiciary Committee, she defended her department, saying it did the best it could to protect their identities in the time frame allotted by the law.
We've released more than 3 million pages, including 180,000 images, all to the public, while doing our very best in the time frame allotted by the legislation to protect victims. And if you brought us a victim's name that was inadvertently released, we immediately redacted it. All members of Congress, as you know, are invited to visit DOJ to see for yourselves. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Epstein survivors who are here today. I'm a career prosecutor, and despite what the ranking member said, I have spent my entire career fighting for victims, and I will continue to do so.
Now, while most of those tough questions about the Epstein files were from Democrats, Bondi also faced tough questions from Republican Thomas Massie, a co-author of the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
So I have several questions for you. Who's responsible? Are you able to track who in your organization made this massive failure and released the victims' names? Are you able to track who it was that obscured Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in an FBI document? Do you have that kind of accountability?
I believe Wexner's name was listed more than 4,000 times. Within 40 minutes, you asked me a question. Within 40 minutes, Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed.
There was one redaction out
Where
of
he's
over
listed as a co-conspirator.
4,700, and we invited you in. This guy has trunk derangement syndrome. He needs to get. You're a failed politician.
I want to bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion live for us on Capitol Hill. Nikole, what were your key takeaways from the hearing today?
Well, I think the biggest one wasn't even what was said. It was just the tone of the hearing overall. It was extremely combative and just a constant barrage of attacks going back and forth between lawmakers and the Attorney General. So in terms of those survivors who were sitting in the room hoping to get answers, they just saw a lot of, finger pointing, if you will, more so than being able to get to the root issues surrounding the Epstein files. I mean, in terms of talking to some of the survivors, that's what one told me, it was helpful for her to be here today. She felt like she did get some clarity, but at the same time, she didn't necessarily want this to be a circus. And at the end of the day, many of these survivors keep coming here to Capitol Hill because they want to help future survivors and prevent others from having to go through what they went through. So that's really why they felt it was important to be here once again on Capitol Hill in this moment. But that being said, obviously, again, it was just a lot of the accusations going back and forth. It was just hard to get clarity around many of the Attorney General's answers as a result of that. So much so, the ranking member after this hearing said there were at least 15 questions that he counted that went unanswered. Chairman Jim Jordan, for his part, though, felt that, look, this was an opportunity to provide some greater transparency, to provide a greater oversight. He argued he feels that the department is doing the best it can with respect to trying to get these files out, even though there have been some missteps under the time constraints, that they're doing the best they can. So, obviously it depends who you talk to coming out of this hearing, but certainly the decorum, I would say, was probably the top headline.
And Nikole, speaking of that, you actually spoke to Congressman Massie during a break in the hearing. What did he say about Bondi's testimony to you?
Well, look, obviously, we saw a very pointed exchange that he had with the Attorney General. It ended with her calling him a hypocrite. And after the hearing, of course, he told me that, look, if they want to resort to name calling, so be it. Obviously, important to note that Massey was the author of that legislation that forced the Justice Department to release these files. So obviously, he and other lawmakers continue to cull through these now unredacted documents that the Justice Department is making available to members of Congress. But he told me that he didn't find the Attorney General's answers satisfactory, particularly with respect to his exchange, because he was asking why the Attorney General and why the department put out information, redacting information of alleged co-conspirators, while at the same time exposing information about victims. So, he didn't really buy the Attorney General's argument in terms of this being a time constraint issue, even though, the Attorney General made clear they tried to correct some of those mistakes once they were brought to the department's attention.
Nikole Killion, thank you so much.